This is Lightning Power Lunch, presented by Reif Rum on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
I don't know. It's really disappointing, actually. Be 50-plus games in, put ourselves in the position we are, and then to come out and play like this. Like, no pushback, no urgency, no drive, no attention to detail. We just gave a decently skilled team with so much open ice. I'm surprised they didn't have 10. Really, really disappointing with our compete level.
Tell you what, that was pretty right to the point. John Cooper, after the game against the Sabres, Lightning lost that one. We'll talk about it here on the show. We are taping. It's Power Lunch on Lightning Radio. Greg Linnelli with you, along with the radio voice of the Lightning, Dave Mishkin. Steve Versnick is our producer. Once again, they got down, partner, multiple goals, and you can't do that against a good team. And I think we can all acknowledge Buffalo's a good team this year, and I think you have to give credit where credit's due. I think a lot of people also are going to be taking a look at a couple of injuries that happened in that game, probably big picture. Dominic James and Gage Gonsalves specifically, two guys who are important to this team in a lot of different ways, but that was tough to see. And I think for me, I'll take the big picture view, and then I'll kick it to you. We'll get into some specifics from that game and then take some comments. I think when you're coming off the run the Lightning were coming off of, which, what was the record, 21-1 or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm. That's what it was. Yeah, after they beat Toronto, 21-1.
That's an incredible run for any team in any league. At some point, you're going to come back to earth a little bit. And when you factor in the Olympic break and then maybe just reversing to the norm a little bit, you're going to have games like we've seen the last couple. That doesn't excuse it. It's just, I think, reality of sports. The key will be, like all of these things, not letting a 2-game losing streak dovetail into a 6 and getting back to the finer details that allowed them to have that incredible streak beforehand. Easier said than done. It's not going to be a lot of practice time. And we've been taking some questions on X and starting to come in more about the defense pairings. And, it feels like you're getting all these guys back, but guys aren't meshing as well. What do you do? So we can talk about that today. But I'm not going to get overly concerned after a couple of tough losses, understanding that you can't discredit what this team did previously without acknowledging, like, okay, it happens, and now you've got to get back on track a little bit, and let's see what happens. I'm willing to give them that benefit of the doubt while also acknowledging these last couple of games haven't been their best, and I think that's completely reasonable considering the incredible streak they were on heading into the Olympic break.
Yeah, you said the two things that you don't want to have happen. You don't want to have a 2-game losing streak blow up into a 6-game losing streak, and then you said basically, not that you don't want this to happen, you do want this to happen. You want to get back to the details of your game. I think of the two, the second is actually more important than the first. Not ideal if the Lightning go on a long losing streak, obviously, but I would feel more comfortable actually if they started playing better and lost still. Honestly, like in the beginning of December, they had a tough stretch. They lost 4 straight in regulation, 2-6-1 in their opening, 9 games in December before they turned it around. And that was the start of this 21-1 stretch. But we were saying they were actually playing pretty well. They were losing a lot of games, 1-0, throw in an empty netter, 2-0, lose a game 2-1. This is different. This is fire wagon hockey they're playing. This is loose defensive hockey. Coop talked about their compete level. Their compete level has been pretty high most of the year. I actually thought they competed hard against Carolina, which helped them get back into the game. But that was reflected in what they were able to do offensively, not really what they did defensively and what they, did well defensively, which is not much.
Sure.
That's been the common denominator. Like Coop talked about, no pushback, no compete level. And I think that is probably tied into the big problem, which is a big problem when this is a big problem. Too many chances against. You're going to have a hard. We talk about it. How many times on the show do we talk about it, Greg? Defense is the key building block to having success. And if you're not going to defend well and you're going to give up chances, no goalie in the world is going to stop all of them. And that means you're going to be giving up more goals than would be ideal, which means you have to outscore your problems. The Lightning almost did it in Carolina on Thursday. They didn't have a chance against Buffalo on Saturday, in part because Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen was really good. Like, he denied some scoring chances that the Lightning had that might have helped them stay in the game, basically. But the chances the Lightning had weren't nearly as glorious as the chances Buffalo had. So if the Lightning are going to do anything in the playoffs, anything, they need to correct this. Now, I'm not suggesting this is going to last for another 20-plus games, but I think the key is for the team, you have to, however you put it, like you have to rediscover the details of your game. Is there any reason to believe they can't do it? Well, they basically did it for 40, 45 games. I mean, even in December, where their record wasn't where they wanted it to be at the start, they were defending pretty well. They just weren't scoring. And we haven't seen this sort of porous defensive play since the early part of the season, like the first few games. So that's the problem. The problem is that they've gotten away from really, I'll say it, if not the key to their success this year, one of the big keys to their success this year: defending, limiting scoring chances, suffocating the other team,
right,
forcing the other team to play defense when they want to go on offense. We haven't really seen that since the Olympic break. Coop even referenced, he said there were holes in our game against Toronto. They were a lot better against Toronto, but Toronto was a mess.
They're struggling.
Yeah, Toronto came out of the break playing maybe the worst hockey of any team in the NHL. So maybe the Lightning kind of started that ball rolling, but the quality of their opposition since the Toronto game has been high. Carolina and Buffalo are playing well, and the Lightning just had a mess defensively in both those games. So how do you fix it? It is not easy. You got to almost I don't want to say break everything down, but it's way easier to slip than to tighten. And the Lightning are going to have to find a way to do it. Eventually you do it. Eventually good teams do it. You're like, enough. We've had it. If we have to win this game 1-0, we're going to do it. They're getting nothing. No chances against. Yep. I mean, that's very hard to do. But that's the attitude that you got to reach, where you're just sick of it, right? You're tired of having the games go this way, and you just deliver the sort of performance that they haven't delivered. So why are we seeing this? I think you hit on a couple of reasons. Number one, it would be unreasonable for us to just discard the Olympic break effect. Now, some teams have had the break and they've come out of the break playing quite well. Good for them. Some of those teams, though, like I was talking with the Buffalo people during the intermission, they're like, we got teams on our tail. Like, okay, Buffalo is doing well, but Buffalo is closer to the playoff cut line than the Lightning. Buffalo's like, we need to hit the ground running here, because you got teams sniffing at our tail. So the Lightning are really not in that position. They're not. They are in a great, compared to some of these other teams, playoff position. Now, Buffalo's 4 points back. Buffalo has done well coming out of the break, but I think that's part of it. I think the urgency level of where you are in the standings is part of why some teams have used the break more beneficially. But a 2 to 3 week break can unravel some of these details of your game. And if you recall, Greg, I was sharing the story, when our oldest Eli was born in 2006, because he just turned 20, right? Just yesterday. So happy birthday to Eli. But that was 20 years ago. The Lightning had an Olympic break, came out of the break, and my wife went into labor on the first game back. But the Lightning lost at home to Florida 8-2. This is a playoff team the Lightning were that year, 05-06. I mean, they didn't finish as high as they would have liked, but like they were in a good position going into the Olympic break. They weren't like last in their division, and they come out of the break and they had a blowout loss, and they really didn't get going for a little bit. It took them a little bit to kind of get back on track, and then they pulled it together into March. They made sure they got into the playoffs. They didn't finish as high as they would have liked, and they lost in the first round to Ottawa. But I've seen this. I've seen a team go into the break playing okay. They come out of the break, and things are off kilter. So that is not uncommon. And the other example I'll use is in the 2019-2020 season, the Lightning had a similar run where they went 23-2-1, and then they went 3-6-1. And then we had the break because the season paused. 3-6-1. They weren't playing good hockey, but you're gonna exhale at some point. And when that happens,
Yeah.
we got animals fighting here.
Was that the Lightning getting angry?
Yeah. Well, that's where you got to get to start playing better defense. Basically, you got to be like, enough. 3-6-1 for a team that ended up winning the Stanley Cup, and they weren't playing well either. I remember they were giving up 5-6 goals a game. They were just in their own way. So it's something that can happen. I think we have a few things here: the break, them having an incredible run and exhaling a little bit. But they got time here. They got time to tighten things up again, and that's going to be the challenge. This is not an easy road trip. In that you got 4 games in 6 days. You're changing time zones a little bit, but the first game is a very late game in Minnesota. We will get into the Minnesota game maybe more tomorrow, but this is another one of these buildings like we talk about St. Louis. There are a few buildings out there. The Lightning, historically, they just do not win games in Minnesota. So they have won games in Minnesota. A couple of years ago, they won a game in Minnesota, but it's single digits, in the time that they've been in the NHL, and Minnesota's been in the NHL. Winnipeg, they've had more success, but not recently. Winnipeg's one of these teams. They're probably going to miss the playoffs, so we'll see where they are. And Lightning just beat the Leafs, but they struggle in Toronto. And we just saw Buffalo and how good Buffalo is right now and how well the Sabres are playing. So this is going to be a tough road trip, but sometimes that's what you need. Yeah. Like you need to be challenged to be like, we need to correct this, and we'll see if they're going to be able to do it. But at this point, I am not concerned about their playoff position. I am more concerned about how they are playing, A, and B, and we can get into this, more injury problems, which hopefully we'll get updates, good updates on the 2 guys that went out the other night.
The James one, seeing that on replay, just didn't look good.
No, it didn't. It reminded me of the Point injury, honestly.
Yes. And,
except Point was able to basically get up and put weight on his leg. James wasn't.
Yeah. Sometimes visually it doesn't jive with what the actual injury is, but sometimes it does. I don't know what happened to Gonçalves, quite frankly. We were talking.
I saw a replay at the very end of the game. He was basically like he fell on the ice and he went skates first into the boards.
Okay.
I don't know if that was the injury, but I saw that, and that would lead you to believe like an ankle situation.
You also, one more note about the game, big picture. You just don't see Vasa get pulled in game often.
Yeah. Coop called it a mercy pull.
Yeah, and Johansson actually might have been their best player.
Yeah.
I mean, he was
sometimes
really good.
when you do that as a coach, you're hoping it'll spark the team.
Yeah.
He said, we played even worse.
Right.
Johansson had to make 16 second period saves.
And a lot of them were
after Vasilevsky
tough.
came out.
Yeah. So I think that was disappointing. But again, I do think you have to, and this is why having a talk show is valuable. You need to be able to recognize, okay, what's just the ebbs and flows of a season when you slump, and also are there some bad habits starting to leak in? It's hard to be able to separate those two because I think there's some overlap with it. I will tell you this, and partner, we can get into the game from here because I do think it has to dovetail with the lineup and the personnel that we are seeing. Since we have come out of the break, we have seen Tampa Bay go with 7 defensemen. And their goals allowed has been 4 or more in those games. Is that just
not against Toronto, but in the last 2?
Yes, yes. Is that something that's just coincidence? Is there something more to it? Do we have to look into that a little bit more? Maybe, and again, that's why we have these shows. But there's no question. One of the things we asked before some of these defensemen were getting back is, what would this lineup look like? Not only who would be in the lineup, but would the Lightning be going more 12-6 or 11-7? And at least, these last 2 games defensively, and I think we can say even in the Toronto game, they were not great defensively, but whatever. Toronto, you were able to come away with a win. Is that something that we need to look a little bit more to? The 7 defensemen, who is in the lineup, who is struggling maybe with less minutes than they were typically getting when they were going with 12-6. And is that just something we all have to keep our eye on? Because I think it was a question a lot of us had, and I think the coaching staff probably was interested to see how would we play this. At least the last couple of games, it does feel a little disjointed.
It's definitely disjointed. The fact that they have gone from a pretty steady lineup of 12-6 where they were winning a lot of games, even as they had injuries, and they still had injuries during this time period where they were winning a lot of games, to now 11-7, and they're not playing as well. Let's say at the very least they're not playing as well defensively. I'm not sure that it's like complete cause and effect. I think that things are disjointed, and maybe switching up the lineup configuration has something to do with that. But the reason they're going with 7 defensemen, I think, is twofold, Greg. One is injured defensemen came back, which is the obvious one, right? Like Hedman came back just before the Olympic break and then, has been in the lineup even though he missed 1 game during the Olympics, that elimination game for Sweden. Destu came back. Lilleberg came back. Crozier went out. Crozier didn't play the last couple of games before the Olympic break, though, apparently still, was feeling the effects of this core injury for which he had surgery. But the other part is the Lightning are now getting short at forward. I mean, let's not forget, Cirelli and Paul were out right before the Olympic break, and then coming out of the Olympic break, Cirelli played on Saturday. And frankly, he didn't have a Cirelli sort of game. I think a lot of people on the Lightning didn't play to their standard, but Cirelli had a turnover on the 5th goal. He didn't get the puck in deep on the 1st goal where the Lightning were trying to execute a change. Like, Cirelli will get better. Cirelli will return to Cirelli form. But, Cirelli missed a month. So he didn't miss a lot of games because the Olympics were happening. He missed the Olympics, unfortunately for him. But I think that, he came back from a long injury absence too. But prior to that, the Lightning were a little thin at forward. They kind of been protecting, honestly, Douglas. They haven't really played him a lot. And when they play him, they don't play him a lot in a game. Sabrin, we talked about, played under 6 minutes against Toronto. Played a little bit more than that in the Carolina game and had a nice assist on the Brandon Hagel goal. But when Cirelli came back, they decided to stick with 11-7. So I think part of it is the defensemen were coming back healthy and the Lightning were a little shorthanded at forward. And now you're taking out Gonçalves and James. So we'll see what the Lightning decide to do. But I think it's a little bit twofold, like why they're going 11-7. It's not just the 7 defensemen, it's also the 11 forwards, because they've now all of a sudden had injuries. Maybe not all of a sudden, but going back to the Stadium Series game is when they started to lose forwards due to injury. So are they playing poorly defensively because they are going with 11-7? I don't think I'm going to make that direct line. I think it's a bunch of things. I think they're not executing as well in terms of their puck management. And I will say this, I think one of the big reasons why the Lightning have been so good defensively this year has been the play of the Gourde line. The Gourde line has been a revelation for the Lightning and honestly for the NHL this year, in that opposition teams are coming in and they are getting extremely frustrated having to play against the Gourde line. They have spent far less time in the offensive zone during the last 2 games. Now, they didn't get the matchup in Carolina. I think Rod Brindamore matched Aho's line. It wasn't points line. I think he wanted stall out against points line. I can't quite remember who the Gord line got, but I didn't notice them buzzing around the offensive zone as much. And I think they were a minus line in that game. They had the Tage Thompson line on Saturday, and they just didn't do what they normally do. It might have been a shift here, shift there, but, it's easy to just point at the defenseman. And they're part of how the Lightning defend. But when you have a line that is neutralizing the other team's best line by forcing them to play defense, that's a big part of you defending. And I don't think that the Gord line has been quite in sync since we came back. Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen, again and again and again and again. They showed us how well they can play, and they've played well as a unit basically the whole year that they've been together. But they're a little bit off now, too, I think. Just based on what I'm seeing, they're not having the puck as much in the offensive zone. That is completely separate from this 7 defenseman thing. So I think it's a combination. Turnovers, rush coverage, D-zone coverage, lack of O-zone time, lack of ending plays in the defensive zone, letting other teams, extend shifts in your own end, not getting a save maybe when they need it. Phil wasn't crazy about the first Josh Norris goal that made it 2-0. He thought Vasi should have had that one, even though it was a tough night for Vasilevsky. They had some pretty nice shots, the Sabres. The second Norris goal was a tip. I mean, that's pretty much an unstoppable shot. Tage Thompson's alone in front, on the fourth goal. So they need to get better, but I don't think you were kind of advancing this notion that you're hearing from fans about, well, they went to 11-7 and now they're not defending as well. That's the reason. I'm not sure that that's the entire reason. I think that might be part of it, that, readjusting the lineup a little bit, but I don't think that's the one.
I do think it's
Nor do I think that now they're going to knee jerk back to 12-6 just because, they've had a couple of tough games in a row. They're going to dress a lineup based on who they have available and who they want in the lineup.
So I think who they have available is a valid point. Sometimes you might not be able to pick and choose necessarily. It's the personnel is going to dictate. However, I think the personnel that you have and how well they are playing or not playing should also factor into that equation. Now, it's a lot easier to sit a Lilleberg than it is, I think, a Victor Hedman. If you are starting to talk about, 7 defensemen and what needs to happen.
They sat Lilleberg in Carolina, though.
Yeah. So
and they had a bad defensive game.
They did. So it's not an easy dilemma to figure out. It's just an observation. It doesn't mean it's going to last this long, and I think people tend to be very critical, more critical when a team is losing than when they are winning. Look, we weren't having any of these conversations when the team was on the streak that they were, 21-1. We were praising the depth. We were talking about how well they're defending, and I don't think that changes after 2 games. I do think it is part of the ebbs and flows of a season, and I think the only thing I will give merit to is that you are going to have to find the defenseman you want to play on a pretty regular basis when everybody is back, and hopefully get a little bit more consistency back there. That being said, again, I'm not going to overreact after a couple of games. Al says, the Lightning's success this season was based on taking care of the D-zone first and not sacrificing defense for offense. Getting into a run-and-gun game with a quicker team is not a recipe for success.
Well, look, that's true, Al. I'm not sure that they got into a quote-unquote run-and-gun game where they're sacrificing defense for offense. I think they've just been poor defensively. Maybe that's semantics because the Carolina game was kind of wide open.
Yeah.
But they're not taking care of business defensively. And I think that they're not taking care of business not necessarily because they're sniffing for offense, maybe a little bit once they fell behind by multiple goals. They're just not handling, as you said, the details of their game are way off. And they're going to have to figure out a way to sharpen those details.
Yeah, that's look. Victor Hedman working his way back, Cirelli working his way back. Now you have a couple of injuries potentially. We don't know how long that's going to be. It just continues to be mixing and matching a little bit, and so far the Lightning have been really good from that perspective in adjusting. But I do wonder too, when you get off your game a little bit, we know they're not going to have a ton of practice time. How much of that will allow them to correct the mistakes quicker, or will it linger a little bit if they're not able to get in there? Is that overrated, or is that something they can address at a morning skates, film sessions? I don't know the answer to that, other than I just hear a lot of coaches talk about the importance of practice time, and you're not going to have it.
Well, they are going to have it this week. I mean, today is the departure day. We're pre-taping, but there is a practice scheduled today. It's going to be a full practice, I'm sure. I'm not sure how long it's going to go, but they can get into the details if they need to. Maybe we take off a half an hour later. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, right.
And then Wednesday, there is a practice scheduled. So the Lightning have the late game in Minnesota on Tuesday. It's late even by Minnesota standards. It's an 8:30 face-off Minnesota time because it's the second half of a doubleheader on TNT. I think.
So what time is that game really happening?
Yeah, it's gonna be like almost 8:50, 9:50 Eastern.
Yeah.
So instead of just leaving right after the game and going to Winnipeg, the Lightning are spending the night in Minnesota, and they'll fly out Wednesday. But there's a practice scheduled on Wednesday, and that will be a dig-in practice. I'm pretty sure. I know both days today and Wednesday you're getting on an airplane after the practice, but the flight from Minnesota to Winnipeg is a short one, and they'll get in a pretty reasonable hour. Yeah. So in this week alone, as you're coming off these wobbly games, the Lightning do have 2 practices scheduled starting today in the next 3 days. That should help. Overall, though, your point is correct. With the condensed schedule, frequency of games, travel, it is going to be more difficult for the Lightning to schedule practice days. Like Friday is going to be an off day.
Right.
They play back-to-back Saturday, Sunday. Monday will be an off day because it's the first day after a back-to-back with travel. I think getting home from Buffalo close to 1 a.m., even though that's a 6 o'clock game on Sunday in Buffalo, which, by the way, schedule makers, thanks a lot. I know it's a bus trip from Toronto to Buffalo, but we're springing forward that night.
Yeah.
So it's really not 23 hours between the games. It's 22 hours between the games because the game in Toronto is at 7 and the Sunday game in Buffalo is at 6, but we're losing an hour.
Come on, the NHL.
Forward.
Let's go. What's
well,
up?
Buffalo has a back-to-back, too. They play both games at home, but I think they play in the afternoon on Saturday. Anyway, it is what it is as it relates to that. So after these 2 practice days, the Lightning are going to have several games with no practice time scheduled. But, look, that's part of it. You have to figure out a way to correct on the fly. And I would point out the Lightning aren't the only team that's been a top team this year that's hit, a rut. It's happened to them now. Remember, Colorado hit a rut. Around the time the Lightning saw them in January, they had such a huge lead. They lost, 2 games in regulation through 41 games? They were going to exhale, and they did. They didn't have a great game against the Lightning in Tampa. Remember, they had a blowout loss. I forget who they lost to at home. They got blown out at home. Very rare. I mean, the Lightning were just blown out at home. Does that mean the Colorado Avalanche are all of a sudden a bad team? No. They kind of corrected, and they fixed it, and they may not be winning at the same percentage level that they were winning in the first half of the year, but, they're maintaining their spot atop the division and, are doing quite well. So,
it's a good point.
We should expect that the Lightning are going to figure that out too.
Yes, and it's a good point. And, the league, I don't think will say it out loud, and maybe they disagree with my take, but, the incredible start to the year, for the most part, that Colorado had, the pace that they were on, and even Tampa Bay's pace recently, partner that they were on, those are outliers. Like the league isn't designed for teams to play that well for that extended period of time better than everybody else because of the parity in the cap. That's kind of why we have this. It's to give everybody an opportunity and not to have these teams that are just so much better than everybody else. But for a portion of the season, Colorado was, record-wise. That's not attainable, I don't think, in today's game. Maybe 30 years ago, you could have a team who, their winning percentage was just astronomical. The Lightning's pace, that just wasn't going to happen for the remainder of the season. That doesn't mean they can't get back to that level. It just might not result in a 21-1 stretch.
And other teams that are on these great sorts of stretches are going to have it too. I mean, a little bit to an extent. I think Detroit has come back to earth. I haven't really been zeroed in on them because the Lightning haven't seen them since right before Thanksgiving. But I know they were on a terrific hot streak. And I see, like, they just lost against Carolina after the Lightning lost to Carolina. Like, they've come back to earth a little bit. And tell you what, so the Buffalo Sabres now are 31 games played. In their last 31, they've won 24 of them.
Yeah.
They're 24-5-2. I don't know if this is going to happen, but let me just say this. I will not be surprised if at some point the Sabres exhale a little bit. They looked really on top of things on Saturday. I mean, the Lightning didn't play well, but the Sabres did. And to the extent the Sabres had some defensive miscues, Luukkonen was there to bail them out, which is part of it. As we talked about when we discussed the Olympics, like the goalie wears the uniform. So the goalie is part of the team.
No doubt.
But would I be shocked if the Lightning play the Sabres it's their last road trip of the regular season. They start in Buffalo. I think it's in early April. I'm not talking about the one this Sunday, but when the teams meet in early April, is it possible I'll say, the Sabres had a 40-game stretch where they were like unreal, and then they went, 2-5. That's possible. It can happen.
Yeah, it is.
Like once you reach a point where you're like, okay, we kind of have a little separation here, and if they keep winning on the pace they're winning, they will get some separation. We're starting to see some teams drop off too that are below the playoff cut line. Some teams haven't, some teams have. And you're going to start to see more of a gap. Maybe not between 8 and 9, but maybe between 11 and 12.
Yeah.
Like we're going to see fewer teams in the East remain in contention. And it's possible that some of these top teams that have been playing at an unreal clip, like the Lightning, are going to exhale. The key is then to limit that and get it corrected as soon as you can.
Fair point. And, again, just to reiterate to a lot of people, you're going to be looking at the top 3 in the Atlantic. You're going to be looking at the top 8. I think where we sometimes will look, partner, is where is Tampa Bay in relation to that first team who's on the outside looking in. Ninth, correct. Yeah. Washington right now at 69 points through 62 games would be that team. And I'll go ahead because I want to bring up another point.
If the Lightning are going to play the way that they played and have played through much of the season, and you were to say to me they're going to play that way in a playoff series, I couldn't care less if they're first in the conference or second wild card.
Yeah, that's.
I don't think it matters. They're going to be a really hard out. If they play, they win at home, they win on the road, they limit chances, they play with the puck, they flummox the opposition. So the key is really for them to play their game. I know that that's really kind of like self-involved to say that, but they played their game and imposed their will on the other team for much of this season. So the key in my mind, and maybe your mind too, is getting to that point when the playoffs begin.
Yes.
If they can get to that point, I don't think it matters who they play, where they play, when they play. It's not going to matter. So that backs up your point that just get in. Whether you finish first in the Atlantic or, I don't think this is going to happen, honestly, Greg, but I'll say it anyway, if they finish in the second wild card. I think finishing in the second wild card.
Yeah.
I would rather have them finish in the second wild card if I knew that they would play the way they've played most of the year, rather than finishing first in the Atlantic and going into the playoffs and playing the way they've played the last
kind of limping
games.
In a little bit,
or just like off on their game a little bit.
Although we have seen teams who have gone into the playoffs not playing particularly well, and then obviously they turn it on. I mean,
but I'm talking about how they play in the playoffs. I'm not talking about going into the playoffs. Yeah,
for sure. And I would that's a very valid point.
Sorry, I cut you off there.
No, side note: Toronto and Florida. I mean, are we throwing in the towel for these two teams? It's tough to look at this and feel like
Toronto has not played well.
Yeah.
I mean, you can make the argument maybe they played their best game of the 3 that they've played. They've lost all 3 in regulation against the Lightning. Yeah. And I thought they got outplayed in that game. They definitely got outplayed against the Panthers. I saw one rush, I forget who scored for Florida, where 2 defensemen like collided with each other and like it the middle of the ice opened like the parting of the Red Sea for this Florida player who scored, and they got absolutely dominated at home on Saturday night by Ottawa. So they look like a team to me that has basically said uncle. Now, maybe they'll turn it around and play better, but if you're the GM of Toronto, like, how can you look at what's happened in the last 3 games and have a feeling that, you want to add at the deadline? Maybe that gave some clarity. Florida's a little different. So Florida had a win against Toronto, and they played pretty well. They've lost 2 in regulation since, but they were tied in the third period in both. Like, they've competed, I think, but they've had excruciating losses. They lost to Buffalo in a game that was 1-1 in the third period, where the Sabres scored the go-ahead goal on a play that Florida felt should have been goalie interference. They challenged and lost the challenge. And then the Sabres scored an empty netter, and Florida got one back in the last 30 seconds. So they lost that game 3-2. Last night, I don't know if you saw this. First of all, they had a 2-0 lead against the Islanders, starting a 4-game road trip, Panthers. Islanders come back and tie it at 2, and then they go up 3-2. The Islanders do. Panthers pull the goalie. Reinhart scores a 6th attacker goal to get the game tied with under 2 minutes left. So they're tied. It was actually 4-4. Sorry, I misspoke. So they went back and forth. I think it was 2-2.
Yeah.
I think the Islanders went up 3-2. Panthers tied it. Islanders scored again. So it's 4-3. Panthers score a 6th attacker goal. Tie it at 4. Less than 2 minutes left. They get the game tied. Looks like they're heading into overtime. Islanders score with 30 seconds left in regulation. That is just a killer loss for the Panthers. So, as we said, they're running out of mulligans. They've had 2 mulligans now in a row that they've used. They're running out of losses, basically, between now and the end of the regular season. But I think they've competed. Based on the closeness of the games they're battling, I'm not sure that Toronto has had a good showing coming out of the break. That's the difference. I just want to mention this because there was a lot of talk about it, and people were like, how can this be goal? How can this not be goalie interference? I don't get it, blah, 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 blah. So this play in which Beck Malenstein for Buffalo scores a goal to give the Sabres a 2-1 lead. It was essentially the game-winning goal because the Panthers never got the game tied again. What happens in the play, Malenstein takes a shot from the point. There's another Sabre, and I don't know who the Sabre was, I'm sorry, but he comes kind of to the side of Tarasov. He's outside the crease. He wants to tip the puck. He's looking at the puck that's coming toward him. He tries to tip the puck. He makes contact with Tarasov's glove. Tarasov cannot make the glove save. Beats him glove side.
Yeah.
There is contact between the stick and the glove. Tarasov is standing in the blue paint, but his glove is in the white. Okay, this is a complicated play in that we talk about the goalie. The goalie is given every benefit of the doubt when it's in the crease, but when it's outside the crease, it becomes much more of a coin toss, right? So if you were to ask me, how do I think this rule should be read? And I'm saying this understanding this is a pro-Panthers take, but I'm going to give a pro-Panthers take if I feel that, I'm not going to be biased against the Panthers simply because the Lightning don't like the Panthers. I think if you were impeding the goalie's ability to make a save, it should be goalie interference. But that's not what the rule says. The rule says if there is contact outside the crease that is incidental, the goal is going to stand. And that is what happened here. It was incidental contact outside the crease. So even though Tarasov's skates are in the blue, the glove is not. And they're saying that Sabres player has the right to that ice too. And he is trying to tip a puck. Again, I will repeat myself. I think the goalie should be given the benefit of the doubt in a play like that to be able to say, I'm trying to make a glove save, and my glove is being impeded with. I think that should have not counted. But that's not what the rule book says. The rule book says outside the crease, incidental contact, good goal. That's what that was. So I know a lot of Panther people, and Paul Maurice was apoplectic, and Tarasov even afterward was, throwing shade at the league and like, well, we just played Toronto, so we just beat Toronto, so, I understand why they took the goal away, which is nonsense, right? But that's why the call was made the way it was made. It was the right call. I don't really like the rule that it takes that or allows that goal to stand, because I think the goalie should have a right to, if the goalie is there with his glove, the goalie should have a right to catch the puck. If a stick is in the way from an opposing player, that should be goalie interference. But again, that's not the way the rules are written.
I still think there's major inconsistencies with how it's called. Incidental contact, not incidental contact. I think there was a play in the Pittsburgh Rangers game, goal disallowed for, barely touching the goaltender. And it's like, really, what's going on here?
If he was in the crease, though.
Yeah. I don't even think he was. I don't even know. I have to go back and look, but there was barely.
I didn't see that one.
Barely any touch. It was moving left to right. So Shesterkin, there's a play. He's moving left to right. He's pushing off his left skate to get over to the goalpost. And maybe his skate touched the Penguin skate. But here's the issue. The guy, the ex-official they had for the broadcast, they go, what do you think? And he goes, I don't think that had any bearing on the play. I don't think he makes that save. It should be a goal. And what ends up happening? Goaltender. And it's like, okay,
I know.
The fact that if you're bringing in an expert, who I probably agree with in his assessment, I think you've said it before a lot of times with some of these calls, use common sense too. Like the puck going off a skate into the net. I mean, guy gets slew-footed. That ends up happening, and it goes in. That's not a kicking motion. That's just the law of average, the law of gravity, the puck hitting his skate. It's going to go in that way.
So let's get to the Bjorkstrand play. Would that have had an impact on the final score? Let's be honest, probably not. But the goal would have counted. Had it counted, it would have made it 5-2 early in the third. Right. The Sabres wouldn't have gotten a power play in which they scored to, at the time, go up 6-1. So the goal is taken off the board. Gensel blows his top, gets a minor and a game misconduct. Sabres end up going on the power play after some 4-on-4 and scoring to make it 6-1. So I think the reason why they said no goal is that Bjorkstrand's skate does come up and basically direct the puck into the net as it's moving. So they call that a distinct kicking motion, which I guess letter to the law, you could say it is a distinct kicking motion. In other words, it's not angling your skate. Like the idea of a distinct kicking motion is the leg is moving. Mm-hmm. That's what they refer to as distinct. But I think, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I would hope that when they say distinct kicking motion, you're really implying distinct kicking motion with intent. That's the idea. You don't want players to be kicking the puck in the net intentionally. Now, you can intentionally direct the puck in. They've actually loosened that a little bit through the years, where you can angle your skate a little bit so that it's going to hit your skate and go in. But the distinction on distinct was, for me, almost like a soccer player bringing back the leg and following through. That's a distinct kicking motion. And the reason that is not to be allowed is the same reason that, I was hearing a story from the Lightning television crew about, because we were talking about the Olympics, and one of the person who works on the crew was like, yeah, I know somebody who works on the Olympics, and these short track speed skating races it's like roller derby, basically. I mean, it's crazy. The difference between what we see with the short track skating and roller derby is they have blades on their feet.
Right.
So like you crash, you could get cut by somebody else's skate. They don't want a player swinging his leg or her leg with a skate blade. That makes sense. All right. What happened to Bjorkstrand? Bjorkstrand is knocked to the ice. His leg comes up as the puck is coming, hits off. The puck hit the skate. The skate didn't hit the puck. That's the difference.
He was slew-footed.
He was knocked to the ice. Yeah, and they didn't call that.
I mean, come on.
But there was no intent there.
Yeah.
I'm not
Agreed.
sure Bjorkstrand even knew the puck
No.
was coming. He didn't intentionally kick at the puck. That's what they want to eliminate. That's why the rule is in place. So I think that they took I'm guessing they took a narrow interpretation of, we're seeing the skate come up.
Yeah.
That to us looks like a distinct kicking motion. The goal is coming off the board.
I also think,
you talked about kind of what's the spirit of the rule. The spirit of the rule is not that. His skate would have come up whether the puck had been there or not. There was no intent on Bjorkstrand's part.
don't you think me and you come on the show more often than not to talk about the spirit of the rule?
Yeah.
I think there needs to be more of that, particularly the offsides. We've talked about this where a goal is taken off the board because of a play that has no bearing on what happened.
I'm not sure there's an answer for that, though, Greg, because that's a black and white. This one is less of a black and white.
I don't know. It just doesn't sit well. It feels wrong. How are we going to change this? And I think that's kind of where we are with a lot of this. By the way, maybe unpopular opinion. What you said makes sense in terms of they want players to avoid using the skate to kick in,
swinging your leg.
Yeah.
That's what they...
I feel like that was very extreme, and that doesn't typically happen. I would allow goals off the skate to go in, whether you intentionally... I just would, because I don't know if that's a huge safety concern. Maybe the one time it does happen, 100 times it doesn't. So that's me going on my soapbox there.
And by the way, you can kick a puck in other spots on the ice. Like, you can kick a puck with a distinct kicking motion to a
That's a good
teammate.
point.
Your stick is being held. You can actually kick a puck to a teammate.
Well, yeah. How many times you see a stick break, right? And you're trying to get that puck up with your skate. So good point by you, partner. Good point by you. Boomer says, now, he has a couple of questions here. I want to respectfully answer each one, but let's get to this first one because I do feel like we're seeing more and more of this, and I don't know what the answer is other than part of this figuring it out. 7 defensemen, 6 defensemen. Boomer says, what are your thoughts on Hedman? I've seen many Twitter warriors complaining about his lack of speed. I tend to give him the benefit of the doubt, thinking maybe it just takes time to regain game speed. I do see him out of position or slow in reading the play, which concerns me and isn't as easy to dismiss. What do you guys see?
Well, let me just state up front, this has been a very tough year for Victor between time missed and injuries. And it was clear that he was playing with an injury at the start of the year because he basically shut himself down, tried to fix it, couldn't, and then shut himself down again and had the surgery. So presuming that he is healthy now physically, understanding that he had we'll call it a mild injury in the Olympics that prevented him from playing. Now it's about getting his timing back and confidence. I don't know how long that's going to take. I will say that I thought for the first time in a long time, and of course we haven't seen him play for quite a bit of time this year, the game was out of reach, but I thought the second half of the Buffalo game, he started looking more like himself. Scored a goal.
First goal of the year.
Yeah, first
I
goal
didn't
of
realize
the year.
that part. I was like, look at it. I was like, that's his first goal of the year.
So maybe that's something he can build on.
Yeah.
But Boomer's points are fair. Like, he has not played well this year. So the question is why?
Yeah.
Is it injury related? Is it like missing time related? Is it age? We know one of those is not going to go back in the other direction. I mean, he's 35. He's not 25 anymore. He himself would say that. So, hopefully as he starts to get his timing back and get into a rep of playing regularly, assuming he stays healthy and is healthy, his level will improve.
I've said this, and I don't know if this doesn't answer anybody's question. This isn't a deep dive into Victor Hedman's game in terms of why he's struggling to get to the level we're used to seeing. I do think your point about his goal might give him some extra juice. It's like anything,
And I thought he was playing better even before he scored the goal.
I think for me, the thing I've noticed about Victor is just the decision-making seems off. And is that because he's had just injuries and, being in and out of the lineup and there's no fluidity to his game? I'm going to give the captain who's a Hall of Famer the benefit of the doubt that he will figure it out. That being said, for me, the way I'm looking at this, I don't know if his game gets back to where it was from now until the beginning of the playoffs. I think for somebody like Victor Hedman, the playoffs can be a complete reset for him mentally. Look, I didn't have the greatest regular season. We got into the playoffs. I, in part, get paid a lot of money to lead this team when it matters the most. And as long as I'm there for my team during this playoff run, at least for this year when the regular season has been so hit or miss, that's how he has to look at it, kind of like Second Life. And so that's a big projection on my part, because there's always that chance that how he's playing in the regular season bleeds into the postseason. This is me just looking at it and hoping, I acknowledge that there's some hoping here, that when the playoffs begin, a light switch maybe turns on for Hetty, and he looks at it and says, it's a new season for me. That regular season, it's beyond me. It's past me. I'm finally healthy. And there's just a different level of focus that happens in the postseason. And I think this team feels like they can do some special things. Mm-hmm. The only way they can do that is to have number 77 playing at a pretty high level. I do believe that. So that's more how I would look at this partner, in hopes that Hetty gets back to being a Norris-level player. I acknowledge, though, that's more hope than what we've seen this year, because what we've seen this year has been inconsistent play. I think more because of the injuries and being out of the lineup than anything else. I don't know if the skills have declined and he's hit this wall and all of a sudden you see him start to do things he can't typically do. I'm not willing to go there. I think some people are. I'm just looking at it. This has been a challenging year, and we've seen a lot of players who are 35, 36 have good seasons too. So I don't think it's going to be because he hits this number and all of a sudden the skills erode. I just think it's been a tough year, and I think he's got to look at and say, clean slate, here come the playoffs, and we see 77 do some things that we're typically used to seeing.
Yeah.
What else are we going to say?
I mean, look, the good news is that we have a little runway before the playoffs begin, so let's monitor the level of his play. I mean, we can take more questions about it.
Yeah.
I mean, what the fans are saying is not untrue. He has had an objectively subpar year, not just for his standards, but for really anyone's standards. He hasn't played as well as he normally does, or as the Lightning need him to. But there are extenuating, if I can use that word, circumstances, dealing with injury, missing a bunch of time. Yeah. I mean, McDonough's missed a bunch of time this year, too.
Sure.
I don't think McDonough's drop-off, and we'll call it that, has been as extreme. But I'm not sure McDonough is quite where he maybe wants to get either.
There are two veteran players.
It's not easy to miss like 20, 25 games and then, roll right back into things.
Their two most decorated defensemen, I don't think have had the year they typically have. I think that's fair to say. And I think a lot of that is, look, you could say, well, Greg, they're hitting a certain age, and when you hit an age, you start to decline. I mean, that's fair for any sport. You hit a certain number, and
it may be more difficult when you're missing 2 months
with injuries too. So I think,
back.
Yeah, yes, but that doesn't mean
I'm talking about in terms of getting in the flow,
yes.
Not the healing part, but the healing part may be an aspect as well.
I mean, did you see yesterday Chris Letang cross-checks Stone from Vegas? Barely touched him, and he was going to his shoulder, and he didn't play the rest of the game. And we know he's had injury issues, and sometimes
he's had injury issues.
Sometimes that happens. It is what it is. I think we've seen enough from Hetty and McDonough to think they come back to where they were. It's just been harder to get there because of the injuries and being in and out of the lineup. But I think, look, part of what makes the Lightning unique are the fact they have some veterans back there who are very good. I mean, the players talked about, particularly on the back end, how valuable Hedman was to their development.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a lot of value there. And if he gets back to where, I'm not even saying, when he was winning Norris trophies, where he was, even last year, a couple years ago, I think they'll be fine. And I think McDonough will too. It takes a little time when you're out of the lineup. So I acknowledge the question. I think we acknowledge the question. We've mentioned it on our show where things have been a little bit off. To the Lightning's credit, they've won games in spite of it to a degree. But I think we both feel like they'll get there, and it just takes a little bit of time. Boomer has another question, which we're going to save for tomorrow. But this third one, partner, he had for us, more designed for you. He said, I'd love to hear Dave break down what he sees in Oliver Bjorkstrand. It's a great shot. I'll speak for Dave. And
well,
then
look,
you can get
that's his greatest asset. I think that his season probably hasn't gone the way he would have liked. I think he would like to have been more impactful to this point 5-on-5.
Yeah.
And he hasn't been. I mean, I think because we got the goal taken away, but I think all but 2 of his goals this year have been power play goals.
Yeah.
Now he's hit double-digit goals,
right,
which is good. I think the Lightning would have liked more production from him. I think he would have liked to have produced more than what he has produced.
Right.
But if he can get his shot off and put it where he wants to put it, it's almost an unstoppable shot. And that's a skill not many people have in the NHL. So, I mean, I think Boomer asked, what have I seen from Bjorkstrand this year? I've seen a guy who's pretty frustrated that he hasn't really been able to use his greatest asset. And when he shot it, a lot of times it's missed the net.
Yep.
So I think I think you mentioned he has not produced the way the Lightning would have liked. I think you were talking about a couple of guys, and you mentioned him. Point was the other, but Point's been heating up. I think Bjorkstrand falls into that boat. But look, I will say on the other side of the coin, he is producing on the power play. I mean, he's one of the team leaders in power play goals scored. And I think Radish is the only guy who has more than him. And the Lightning's power play has been good. It's been one of the best power plays in the NHL since January 1st, and even going back prior to that for a few weeks, it's been excellent. And he's been a part of that top unit. So, I think we have to give him credit for that. But
I agree.
The shot is really his greatest asset.
It is.
And we want to see him use that shot and be able to use that shot.
It's been a frustrating year for him. Honestly, much like Hetty, I think when the playoffs roll around, there almost needs to be a reset mentally and just say, look, it hasn't been what I wanted, but I can really make a difference in the postseason. And we have seen players do that. And I think those are a couple of them to keep an eye on moving forward. All right, we've got our show again tomorrow. Of course, we're going to be previewing the game. It's going to be a tough one, no doubt about it.
Minnesota had a loss to St. Louis at home last night, so they're not going to be pleased about that game. But
Billy Guerin made a big move, and got Hughes on the back end.
Yes.
And that has been a big deal.
They still have to re-sign him, though, don't they? I don't think he's been inked to an extension yet.
Nothing yet. But they went for it.
They went for it.
He's somebody
tremendous.
Like that.
We don't see him a lot just because he's been out west, but if you watched any of the Olympics at all.
Did you hear Brian Engblom?
And he missed the Four Nations last year because he was hurt.
Brian Engblom said he is the closest player to Bobby Orr.
Just the way he skates and moves around the ice. Yeah.
So it'll be fun talking about that tomorrow with you, partner, and doing our show as well. Get those questions in at Bolts Radio as well. Safe travels.
Thank you.
I will talk to you tomorrow.
Talk to you tomorrow.
You got it. Dave Mishkin right there. Steve Ersnick, thank you for all your work. And for all of you listening, we will be live tomorrow, so make sure you get those questions in. I am Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch right here